Tom Brady is the undisputed greatest quarterback of all time. Patrick Mahomes is the chosen next one. Both quarterbacks entered the NFL and immediately made an impact. But whose first 5 seasons were better? 2018 to 2022 Patrick Mahomes, or 2001 to 2005 Tom Brady? This is a debate comparing and contrasting every stat and variable: regular season performance, playoff and Super Bowl performance, accolades, awards, achievements, supporting cast, coaching, competition, and winning. This won't be a simple comparison of numbers. This is a nuanced discussion. This isn't meant to be a pro Brady video or a pro Mahomes video. It's meant to be a fair and objective, contextualized debate. Now, let's find out which beginning of a career was more impressive, Brady or Mahomes? Before I get started with the debate, don't forget to spike the like button and comment your opinion. Are you Team Brady or Team Mahomes? Which first 5 years do you think were more impressive? Now, let's discuss. This right here is exactly what I want to avoid. This is an overview. The simple, basic statistics of Brady and Mahomes through their first 5 seasons of their NFL career. But if you know anything about the NFL and its history, you would realize that this is extremely flawed. And this is all we see all over social media. And quite frankly, this right here is extremely unfair to a young Tom Brady, because the sport of football is extremely different than it was in the early 2000s. And to provide that context for you, I want to give you an outline of the eras of football so we understand where this debate should properly be discussed. Because we can't discuss it simply on stat for stat, yards for yards, touchdowns for touchdowns. It's not fair for Brady, and it's really not a proper way to judge greatness. In today's NFL, it's pretty normal for a quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards. But that was not the case in the 2000s. Only 2 quarterbacks in 2005 threw for over 4,000 yards. And Tom Brady was one of those quarterbacks. In 2003, the same happened. Only 2 quarterbacks. And now you see 2 quarterbacks throwing for 5,000 yards in pretty much every season. 12 threw for 4,000. The game is so much different. Yards are put up at a rapid rate. Touchdowns, the very same. Other than Peyton Manning's 2004 season of 49 touchdowns, which is a complete outlier, it was rare for a quarterback to go over 30 touchdowns, never mind 40. 0 in 2002. A quarterback didn't even throw for 30 touchdowns in that season. And Tom Brady led the NFL in touchdowns that year with 28. Greatness is measured different in different eras. You can't simply compare stat for stat. In terms of eras, 2000s football is actually a lot closer to 1980s football. 2003 had less yards per game than 1993, 1988, 1987, 1981. Those games were much closer than the game we see today. Quarterbacks in the 80s were throwing for, yes, a lower passer rating, lower completion percentage, but quarterbacks in the 80s compared to the 2000s, that's 20 years apart, 2003 and 1983. Those quarterbacks, for perspective, were throwing more yards and touchdowns per game than 2003. You can't even compare the numbers from the early 2000s, from a 2003 to a 2023. They are uncomparable. Completion percentage is way up. Yards per game are way up. Touchdowns per game, way up. Passer rating is a completely different deal. The guy that would lead the NFL in passer rating in 2003 is just an average quarterback in today's standards and today's statistics. And that's thanks to the rule changes. It's thanks to the lack of physicality that the game is played with, the scheme, how the game has evolved, how the game is called from an offensive standpoint. Everything is different. So you must come into this debate with a different perspective, because quarterbacks just simply put up way greater, bigger, gaudy numbers that they never used to. I mean, 14.6 higher rating than the 2000s, 6% higher completion rate. That is incredible. That is wild. So now that we have the perspective for eras in the NFL and understand that the 2000s and the 2010s are so far apart that the 2000s are closer to the 80s style of football, we can now compare Mahomes and Brady accurately and properly. But we must begin at the very beginning. We must begin with how both teams were situated before they got both quarterbacks. The New England Patriots, of course, drafted Tom Brady in the 6th round. Everybody knows the story, 199th overall. But what people forget about that is that was also the first year for Bill Belichick with the New England Patriots, which means that the Patriots were really starting from zero, from the ground up. They had to rebuild this franchise, rebuild this roster, rebuild this team. Patrick Mahomes, on the other hand, was traded up for by the Chiefs as a first rounder. Both players were slept on, at least to some degree. One was just more misevaluated than the other. Mahomes should have went first overall. Tom Brady should have went first overall. They were both mistakes. One was just 6th round. One was actually wanted in the first round. And the Patriots were much worse off initially than the Chiefs. The Chiefs were a playoff team before Patrick Mahomes got there. Alex Smith took this team to the playoffs in consecutive years, year after year after year. Now, he didn't have a lot of success in the playoffs, but Andy Reid and Alex Smith managed to win a lot of games. And the year before they got Mahomes, they won 10. The year previous to that, they won 12. And the year before that, they won 11. The Patriots, on the other hand, were a mid-franchise. They were 5-11 in 2000, the first year with Bill Belichick. 8-8 and 9-7 during the Pete Carroll years. And it wasn't like they didn't have a great quarterback. Remember, guys, this team had Drew Bledsoe, who was a first overall pick and who did bring the New England Patriots to the Super Bowl in 1996. So it wasn't like Belichick didn't have a very good quarterback already. I would probably say that Bledsoe was more talented than Alex Smith. And I think if you looked at both their resumes, they're fairly similar. And I think a lot of people would say that Drew Bledsoe was the better player. What's also key is that Tom Brady came in 2001 thanks to that big hit by Mo Lewis of the New York Jets in week number 2. And the Patriots were already 0-2 before he ever started a game. Patrick Mahomes got to start the beginning of the 2018 season for a playoff team. Tom Brady started for a 5-11 and also 0-2 New England Patriots team. On top of that, the Patriots lost Terry Glenn, one of their best players and arguably their best receiver during the 2000-2001 season. The Chiefs, on the other hand, they added Sammy Watkins, a former 1,000-yard receiver, to go along with Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and to add more weapons around their young quarterback because obviously Mahomes wasn't making a lot of money, so they could load up around their young quarterback. That wasn't the case for the New England Patriots. They really had nothing on offense, no established weapons that have ever been featured before in their offense. Andy Reid and Bill Belichick. Both are successful coaches. We both know them as two of the greatest coaches of all time now. But what were they then? What were they before Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady? Andy Reid was an already probable Hall of Famer, all-time great head coach, coaching 16 seasons, going to the playoffs 13 out of 16 seasons, having already double-digit playoff wins, a Super Bowl appearance, 5 conference championship appearances, 8 division titles in 2 different divisions, and only 3 losing seasons in 16 years. Bill Belichick, on the other hand, had 6 seasons under his belt. A bunch in Cleveland, just 1 in New England, 1 playoff season, 1 playoff win. Not even close to the resume that Andy Reid had with different quarterbacks. Alex Smith, Donovan McNabb. Bill Belichick did not have that resume. Not even close. He actually had more losing seasons than Andy Reid did at that time. And he coached 10 less seasons. It's pretty common knowledge that Andy Reid is one of the greatest offensive coaches of all time and an offensive mastermind, a great play caller, a great schemer, all of that. Bill Belichick, offensively, not so much. He's a great defensive mind, probably the greatest of all time. But offensively, no. 0 top 10 offenses before the year 2001, before the arrival of Tom Brady. And still to this day, if you want to include that, Patriots have struggled to have a good offense post Tom Brady. In 2000, they ranked 25th in the NFL offensively with Drew Bledsoe, a Pro Bowl quarterback, a Super Bowl appearance quarterback, a Hall of Very Good quarterback, 25th. That was with Terry Glenn. 0 Pro Bowl quarterbacks in his 6 seasons previous to Tom Brady in Cleveland and New England. Andy Reid, on the other hand, 11 top 10 offenses and ranked 6th the year before Mahomes arrived. McNabb was a 6-time Pro Bowl quarterback with Andy Reid and an arguable Hall of Famer. Alex Smith, a 3-time Pro Bowl quarterback. Bill Belichick did not have a single Pro Bowl quarterback in his 6 seasons. So these 2 quarterbacks started in totally different situations. It's easy to say now that Tom Brady was in a great situation, but back then, I wouldn't say so much. On the other hand, either way you look at it, Patrick Mahomes was in a pretty good situation, whether you look at it now or you look at it then. He was coming into a great situation, especially considering he wasn't a 6th round pick. He was a 1st round pick. Now let's discuss the biggest category between the 2 quarterbacks, because this is the category that everybody talks about first. This is the determining factor for quarterback play. Quarterback wins is a real thing. The quarterback is most responsible for wins and losses. The quarterback is judged by Super Bowls and a lack of Super Bowls. You don't ask how many yards does the guy have in his career, how many touchdowns did he throw. You ask how many rings did he win, how many games did he win, because that's what all athletes are measured by. Tom Brady won more rings during his first 5 seasons, than Patrick Mahomes. 3 out of 4 and 3 out of 5. Patrick Mahomes went to 3 Super Bowls, lost 1, and he won 2. So pretty darn good for both sides. But Tom Brady did not lose 1 Super Bowl, and Mahomes did. So that's important. But Mahomes did win more games, and he did have a better regular season win percentage than Tom Brady. And he did lose less games than Tom Brady during this stretch. But remember that Mahomes came into the better situation on the better team with the more accomplished coach. Playoffs, Mahomes won more games, but lost more games. Brady had a crazy 91 win percentage. through his first 11 starts in the playoffs, losing his first game in his 5th season in the NFL. Mahomes lost his first game in his first season, but bounced back in the next year, winning his first Super Bowl, went to back-to-back Super Bowls, and then capped his 5th season off with his 2nd ring. Mahomes also more consistently went deeper into the playoffs. 5 conference championship appearances. He also won his division 5 out of 5 seasons. So Mahomes was more consistent, but he wasn't as dominant. He wasn't as accomplished in terms of rings. So that is a pretty even debate. But ultimately, the rings decide it all. And I think just the fact that Tom Brady was unbeatable at one point in time in the playoffs is the deciding factor in this argument. There was an unbeatable Tom Brady and an unbeatable New England Patriots team. They won 10 straight playoff games from 2001 to 2005. Think about that for a second. And not only did they win 10 straight playoff games, they won 21 straight games from 2003 to 2004. The unbeatable Brady, I believe, is the deciding factor in terms of winning during their first 5 seasons. Tom Brady was the youngest quarterback to achieve these feats, the most consecutive wins to start a career by a starting quarterback in the playoffs with 10. The most consecutive playoff wins by a starting quarterback still exists today and will for a very long time. And of course, those 21 games in a row, which was a record in the NFL. So that to me is the deciding factor in terms of winning. I can understand that Mahomes was more consistent year to year, season to season, because he did not have a 2002 season where the Patriots missed the playoffs. They still had a winning record, but missed the playoffs. So if you want to side with Mahomes, I get it, but I also would lean towards Brady because of the clutch factor for Brady in these wins. From 2001 to 2005, including the postseason, when tied or down by 1 to 7 points in the fourth quarter, it didn't really matter. It happened 27 times with Tom Brady as the Patriots quarterback, and he won 78% of those games, which was an outrageous number. Tom Brady was responsible for coming back and winning these games in the fourth quarter. A lot of people will tell you it's the defense. A lot of people will tell you it's Belichick. As you can see, it was Tom Brady. You compare him to guys like Peyton Manning and Brett Favre and Drew Brees and all the great quarterbacks of his era, and none were even close to Tom Brady. The guy just never lost, even when he was down or tied in the fourth quarter. Now, the same can be said to a certain degree for Patrick Mahomes. But as we discussed in terms of eras, it's much easier to come back in games nowadays. It's much easier to throw the ball nowadays than it was back then. So the very fact that Tom Brady was able to win this many games when trailing, when it was tougher to throw the ball, I think speaks volumes as a young quarterback. Now let's move on to something that's not so close. Winning was close. Accolades, not so much. Patrick Mahomes definitely overwhelms a young Tom Brady in the accolades department. They were tied for Super Bowl MVPs, both with 3 appearances. But Mahomes was the more successful individual, winning 2 MVPs to Brady's 0. He also had 1 more season voted in the top 3 for MVP votes. Tom Brady was voted twice as the 3rd player for the MVP award. He was in that top 3, but he never actually won the award. The All-Pro also goes to Mahomes, 3-1. Brady was a second-team All-Pro in 2005. Mahomes was a first-team twice in his MVP seasons and a second-team once in 2020. Both led the NFL in yards once. Mahomes in 2022, Brady in 2005. And touchdown leader, Mahomes led it right off the bat in 2018 as well as 2022. and Tom Brady in 2002. So both players led the NFL in those categories, but Mahomes was more successful, throwing for big numbers. Mahomes overwhelms Tom Brady in the accolades. Now, let's get to... So now what I want to do is compare both quarterbacks year to year, season to season. 01 Brady versus 18 Mahomes. And compare which quarterback was more successful, leading the NFL and placing in certain statistics. Let's take a look at year one. Tom Brady in 2001, Patrick Mahomes in 2018. Brady was more successful in completion percentage, but failed in the other categories. Of course, Mahomes was super prolific in his first year in the NFL, arguably the best first season in NFL history in terms of numbers and stats, and it's a historic season. 50 touchdowns, I don't care what year it is, that's craziness. Patrick Mahomes right off the bat was taking the NFL by storm. Tom Brady, not so much, was more of the quote-unquote game manager type. But again, Mahomes had the better team, the better weapons, the better offense, all of that. Both were winning games, but Mahomes was doing it via his right arm. In year number two, that changes a little bit. Interesting enough, if you were to compare both of their stats in year two, Mahomes' raw stats to Brady's raw stats, it's not even close. Mahomes is way on top. But when you compare their league rankings to their peers at the time, Brady was the better year two quarterback after winning the Super Bowl in year one. Mahomes won the MVP in year one, but did not win the Super Bowl. This is the lone year where Tom Brady is far better than Mahomes. He wins 3 out of the 4 categories, including finishing first in the NFL in touchdowns. A lot of people forget or just don't know that Tom Brady was really, really good in year two, throwing the most touchdowns in the NFL. And the reason I believe that he did this is because they weren't as good of a team. Remember, in this era, when your team was really good, you didn't need to throw as much. More teams ran the ball. They were more balanced. So when the Patriots weren't as good, Brady put up better numbers. That's not really the case nowadays because in order to win, you have to throw. So that's the difference. This year indicates how different football was, in my opinion, because 2002, if you were putting up big stats, you probably weren't that good of a team. You had to put more pressure on your quarterback. In season number 3, Patrick Mahomes is the superior quarterback. It shifts back to his dominance in the statistical categories. He does not lead the NFL in any category. He does lose completion percentage to Tom Brady, but overall, the more successful quarterback. 3 categories, placing in the top 5 for season number 3 for Mahomes. In year number 4, this one's an interesting one because just taking both quarterbacks and watching both quarterbacks in these seasons, I would say that 2004 Tom Brady played better than 2021 Patrick Mahomes. Now, Mahomes had better volume statistics, but he wasn't as good as an efficient quarterback for that era, that time, than Tom Brady was in 2004. 2004 Tom Brady was throwing the ball down the field. Mahomes was starting to shift into this short passer. Teams were starting to play a lot of 2-shell, cover 2, and force him to throw the ball underneath. And that threw Patrick Mahomes off in terms of his rating and his completion percentage. It drastically changed in year number 4. And we'll see an evolution in year number 5. But when watching both players, I would say that Mahomes wasn't as good as Brady in 04, even though they both split the categories, the top 4 categories that we recognize for NFL stats. In year number 5, this is where Mahomes really matures. Mahomes matured in 2022, led the NFL in yards, led the NFL in touchdowns. And it's kind of interesting because Tom Brady statistically did the same. Now, again, it's funny because Tom Brady, when his teams were worse, put up better numbers. And I think that's just indicative of the era. In 2002, he led the NFL in touchdowns. In 2005, he led the NFL in yards. In both seasons, he won 9 and 10 games. In both seasons, the teams were good, but they weren't great. They didn't win 14 games like they did in 03 and 04. But if you just took the raw stats, you would say, oh, Brady was better in the season. That wasn't really the case. It was just that he had to do more. He had to throw more. Mahomes was always asked to throw more. always asked to put up more volume, always asked to kind of score more points because of the era that he was involved in. Both quarterbacks in year 5, phenomenal players. Mahomes, though, leading the NFL in 2 categories, is pretty darn impressive. He takes the final year, year number 5. So when we compare them stat for stat, Patrick Mahomes is the superior player in terms of numbers and statistics. Tom Brady, definitely better in terms of completion percentage, but Mahomes is better in yards, touchdowns, rating. He had more first place finishes. He was in the top 6 more often. I did top 6 instead of top 5 because for whatever reason, both quarterbacks finished in 6th a number of times in a number of different categories in a number of seasons. Weirdly enough, Tom Brady was more consistent at finishing inside the top 10 than Patrick Mahomes. I do believe because of completion percentage. Mahomes' completion percentage does not stack up in his era the way that Brady's does in his era. Outside of the top 15, is the same, which is very odd. Mahomes had these weird moments of not finishing in the top 15 in certain statistics, while Tom Brady was very consistent, but didn't have the elite level stats the way Mahomes did in his era. Now, the era adjusted statistics will show you how much more dominant Mahomes' numbers are than Tom Brady. Tom Brady was very, very good for his time, as his era numbers will indicate. He was above average in all statistics. His yards were way above average, leading the NFL in 2005. His touchdowns were above average. His passer rating especially above average for his career in those first 5 seasons. Contrary to popular belief, by the way, a lot of people just thought that Tom Brady was a game manager. That wasn't the case. Patrick Mahomes, though, clearly MVP type player. All-pro type player based on stats alone. Yards per game through the roof. The only stat that isn't through the roof is completion percentage, as we've discussed. But touchdowns, yards, ridiculous. Even passer rating at times, 16 points higher, 20 points higher, 14 points higher than the average quarterback. That shows you how much more dominant Mahomes was statistically in his era. But as we know, stats aren't the only thing. Now, what also shows that Patrick Mahomes is amazing is his records. His records are off the charts for his young career. You see them there. I'm not going to read every single one of them out, but consecutive 300 plus passing yards games, total yards in a season, total touchdowns in a postseason, numerous records that Mahomes has accomplished and achieved very early in his career. But here's the thing. We know that wins, a lot of people will say, are a byproduct of team success. But the same can be said about stats. Receivers have to catch the ball, offensive linemen have to block, the offensive play caller has to call the right play, and of course the quarterback has to make the throw. Stats are also a byproduct of situation. And that's where we start to discuss the difference between the weaponry and the offensive supporting cast of Patrick Mahomes compared to Tom Brady. Tom Brady's numbers for his era were pretty good. Above average, definitely. Patrick Mahomes, though, were spectacular. And there's a reason for that. That's because the weapons. Kansas City Chiefs have had all-pro Hall of Fame players every year of Mahomes' career from 2018 to 2022. The Patriots have barely even had any weapons in the Pro Bowl. Never mind the Hall of Fame for Tom Brady to throw the ball to. Tom Brady only had one Pro Bowl receiver, 2001 Troy Brown. That's it. Deion Branch, David Gibbons, all these guys did not make the Pro Bowl, did not make an All-Pro team, definitely not making the Hall of Fame. And the craziest part about it is that none of these players were good before Tom Brady came around. Tom Brady elevated these players. 0 receivers previously, before Brady, before the chance they played with number 12, had 1,000 yards receiving. On the other hand, 4 different seasons with Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Juju Smith-Schuster, Sammy Watkins, all these players had 1,000 yards at some point in time before they got to the Kansas City Chiefs. 10 total Pro Bowls, 5 total All-Pros, 10-1, 5-0. That is outrageous in terms of the support in the favor of Patrick Mahomes. Now, what's interesting to me is how I brought up elevating receivers, elevating teammates, which is huge for quarterbacks because quarterbacks are the leader of the team. Not only are they the leader verbally in communication, but they're also the leader in terms of elevating those around you. And this is what Bill Belichick said was the greatest strength of Tom Brady, and I can't disagree with him. Now, not saying Patrick Mahomes did not do this. He did. He elevated Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce on arrival from what Alex Smith was doing. But he also has shown that maybe these players are just so good that they can go elsewhere and be successful. Tyreek Hill went to Miami with Tua, a fairly average quarterback, and put up the best season of his career. 119 receptions, 1,700 yards, 7 touchdowns. That is 9 more catches, 471 more yards, and 2 more touchdowns than the previous season in Kansas City 2021. Now, Deion Branch was the number 1 target for Tom Brady in 2003, 2004, 2005. The number 1 target, the best receiver, Deion Branch, who won a Super Bowl MVP in Super Bowl 39. He got traded for a first-round pick to the NFC representative in the Super Bowl, the Seattle Seahawks, who lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a very good team, a team that was better than New England, that had a good quarterback in Matt Hasselbeck. Deion Branch left Tom Brady and had 25 less catches, 273 less yards, and 1 less touchdown. So who was the one to elevate these talents? I think that shows you that Tom Brady had a special skill in doing so. Now, weapons wasn't the only area where Mahomes benefited from in terms of his statistics being greater. Also, he had better protection. The offensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs has seen numerous All-Pro talents and Pro Bowl players. For Tom Brady, he had 1 Pro Bowl offensive lineman from the years 2001 to 2005. Damian Woody in 2002 at center. Damian Woody was a good player. Patriots had good players like Matt Light, but they never made the Pro Bowl and they never were an All-Pro. The Kansas City Chiefs have gone out of their way to sign, draft, and hire offensive linemen to protect Patrick Mahomes. Mitchell Schwartz is a 2-time All-Pro. Orlando Brown was a Pro Bowler before he got to Kansas City and is a Pro Bowler since, 2-time Pro Bowler. Eric Fisher was a 2-time Pro Bowler who I think was drafted first overall in the NFL draft. Creed Humphrey is a Pro Bowler and probable future All-Pro. Joe Thuney, surprisingly enough, only a 1-time Pro Bowler, is an excellent player though, and they signed him to a huge rich contract, one of the richest guards in NFL history. That also has an impact in another area of offense, the running game. The Kansas City Chiefs, contrary to popular belief, have a superior running game to what the Patriots had in early Tom Brady's career. And these numbers actually shock me. I'm not even going to lie. I thought the Patriots had a good running game back in the day, but that isn't actually the case when you break down the numbers, which shows you that Tom Brady had to do more for his offense. The average rushing offense for the Patriots ranked only 13th compared to 10th for the Kansas City Chiefs. And as you can see, in every single season of their career, from year 1 to year 5, Mahomes had a better running game. 6th in 18 compared to 24th, 20th in 19 compared to 27th, 12th in 2020 compared to 30th, 7th in 2021 compared to 18th, 8th in 2022 compared to 30th in 2005. And every single statistic pretty much across the board, the Kansas City Chiefs were better, despite the Patriots running the ball more, making an absolute note to run the football. They were 14th in the NFL on average from 2001 to 2005 in attempts. They wanted to run the ball, but they were not good at it. Their average yards per attempt was 26th in the NFL, which is bottom tier in the NFL. The Chiefs, on the other hand, 11th in the NFL. When they ran the ball, the Patriots were bad, the Chiefs were good. Much more support on the run game, on the ground, for Mahomes. Now, in terms of supporting cast, clearly, Mahomes has all the talent offensively. Weapons, offensive line, even running game. But defense, is that a different story? Because we know that the Patriots had great defenses in the early 2000s. And if you guess that the Patriots were better on defense, you're mostly correct. So in terms of players, talent on defense, they're fairly similar, fairly close. All pro players, the Patriots had 4 throughout that 5-year stretch. The Chiefs only 2, Chris Jones and Tyrann Mathieu. But the total all pros are the same, 6-6. Pro Bowlers, 5-4 Patriots. Total Pro Bowls overall, 11-10. Very close, much closer than I would have thought. And in terms of Hall of Famers or future Hall of Famers, the Patriots currently have 2 with Richard Seymour and Ty Law, and maybe Rodney Harrison, maybe. And then the Chiefs are likely going to have Chris Jones for sure, and then maybe Tyrann Mathieu. So from a talent standpoint, you give the slight edge to the Patriots, but not by a lot. Now let's take a look at the defensive units per season. Now on average, the Patriots had the better defenses. They were better in terms of DVOA. They were better in terms of points allowed. They were better in terms of yards allowed. They both had the same amount of top 10 defenses, 3 out of 5 years, which might be surprising to some people out there because a lot of people think the Chiefs haven't had good defenses, but they've had 3 top 10 points against defenses, which is what most people use to measure defense. You could go into DVOA, which is an entirely different metric, but as you can see, 13th compared to 21st on average. And the Chiefs had 1 bottom 10 points allowed defense, Patriots 0, although their 2005 defense was actually the worst defense via DVOA out of all of the defenses for both teams. So the 2005 Patriots, according to DVOA, were the worst defense. The 2003-2004 Patriots were the best defenses, according to points allowed and DVOA. So, collectively, the Patriots, Tom Brady, did have better support from his defense, as you would think having Bill Belichick as his head coach. But, to defend Tom Brady, it's not like he relied on his defense to win all his games. Tom Brady was the best quarterback in the NFL from 2001 to 2004 when opponents scored 24 plus points. He still had the highest win percentage in the NFL in such games, which means when his defense did not play well, Tom Brady overcame. Tom Brady was able to overcome a bad performance and still put the team on his back and win the game. Supporting cast is one thing because we can learn how much support, how much help a quarterback had on offense or on defense. But competition is an even bigger thing. Who did these players play? How great were the defenses they played? How great were the teams and the quarterbacks they faced? And that's what I want to discuss next. Let's begin with Tom Brady's AFC East through the years 2001 and 2005. Miami was an above average team. New York was an average football team, and the Bills were the worst of the bunch. The AFC East had 4 other playoff teams other than the New England Patriots and 6 under 500 seasons. How does that stack up with the rest of the conference at the time? The AFC East was actually the best division in football when you account for the amount of teams that went to the playoffs and the amount of teams that did not go below 500, that were better than 500. The AFC East was superior to the AFC North, the AFC South, and the AFC West. Again, the AFC East had 4 other playoff teams, including a 2004 Miami team that didn't even make the playoffs and won 10 games. They don't even make this list. The AFC East during 2001 to 2005 was the best division in football when you take out the New England Patriots. When it comes to Patrick Mahomes' AFC West, the Chargers were very similar to the Miami Dolphins, a good football team above 500 that constantly were in their own way. The Las Vegas Raiders and the Denver Broncos, on the other hand, were bad, like really bad. The AFC West had 3 other playoff teams during this stretch, this 5-season stretch. 3 other teams that were wild card teams. The Raiders once, the Chargers twice. They had 10 teams under 500. Now compare that to Brady's AFC East. Brady's AFC East had more playoff teams and far less teams that were just straight up bad. Just straight up awful. 6 under 500 seasons compared to 10 under 500 seasons. Now, the AFC West from 2018 to 2022 was fairly average. They were tied with the AFC East in terms of quality, but not as good as the AFC North. So Tom Brady's division was stronger. They had better teams. They made the playoffs more often. But what about the defenses? Because that's really what matters. How often was Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes playing good defenses inside their own division? After all, that's 6 games every single year that they have to play against these opponents. Stacking up the division defenses for Mahomes and Tom Brady, Brady not only had the stronger overall division in terms of wins and losses, but also the much tougher division in terms of defenses. And I may argue that this was the best division in football in terms of defense from 2001 to 2005, featuring 7 top 10 defenses compared to just 3 for Mahomes through his first 5 seasons. 3 top 5 defenses through that 5-year stretch. 1 number 1 defense that was not the Patriots, the Buffalo Bills in 2004. 5 bottom 10 defenses, that's it. And only 3 bottom 5 defenses compared to 6 and 4 for Mahomes. So Mahomes was playing easier defenses, easier opponents, and overall easier division. When we look a little bit deeper at this, the AFC East had a lot of very good defenses, as I said, but they were also great against the pass. The Bills were the best team in the NFL on defense in 2004, according to DVOA, and the best against the pass. The Dolphins in 2002 were only worse than the 2002 Bucks. You may remember that was a pretty good defense. They were second in the NFL overall and third in passing defense. The Dolphins, as a collective with Zach Thomas and Jason Taylor, were incredible on defense, 2nd, 5th, and 7th overall. But the Bills, the Jets, every team seemingly had a good defense during this stretch. Now, for the Chiefs, they faced the Broncos defenses of 2018 and 2022, but neither were elite. Neither were in the top 5. None of the defenses that Mahomes played in his division were ever in the top 5. And only once were top 5 against the pass, 5th in 2018. And the Chargers were barely inside the top 10 in either category. So Mahomes has never really ever had to face an elite defense, a top 5 defense in his division through his first 5 seasons, which I think also adds to why his numbers are so spectacular, because he's beating up on terrible division foes. But the division is only one part of the competition. Overall, you must play your conference, especially when it comes to the playoffs. You're going to play the Joe Burrows, the Josh Allens, the Peyton Mannings, and the Ben Roethlisbergers for both of these quarterbacks. So what about the conferences at the time? Was the AFC better then, or was the AFC better now? Let's take a look. The AFC in the early 2000s was arguably the strongest it's ever been. Tom Brady faced 10 total 12-plus win teams during this 5-year stretch. 3 teams in 2003, 2004, and 2005 that had 12-plus wins in just the AFC alone. It's rare to even see that in the entire league in one season, but that happened in the AFC alone. And 5 teams that won 13-plus games. That is incredible. This is arguably the greatest AFC ever. Now for Mahomes, not so bad. 8 total 12-plus win teams, 4 total 13-plus, but still not as good, not as spectacular as the AFC used to be. Remember, this AFC that Brady was playing had Peyton Manning and Ben Roethlisberger and Steve McNair and the other Chiefs teams with Priest Holmes and Trent Green, and it had the Chargers with Drew Brees. A lot of great teams, and this doesn't even include like Ray Lewis. So a great conference overall that just dominated the NFL at the time. It pretty much seemed like whoever came out of the AFC, is going to go and win the Super Bowl. That's pretty much what it felt like in those 03, 04 type of years in the AFC. So we've discussed supporting cast, we've discussed competition, but what about the prime time? When the games really matter? Playoffs, the biggest games of the year. Who was better? Who was the better quarterback? Who had the better numbers? Let's take a look. So collectively, 14 games for Mahomes, 11 for Tom Brady. As you can see, the raw data, Patrick Mahomes, far better, not even close. Way better in terms of yardage, obviously way more attempts, but way more yards, way more touchdowns, a phenomenal passer rating, historic all-time numbers. The only thing Tom Brady really beats him in is just end-of-the-game situations, game-winning drives, where Brady had 5 in 11 games, and Mahomes had 4 in 14. Other than that, Mahomes is the better player statistically in the playoffs than Tom Brady. And Brady is known as the greatest playoff quarterback of all time. But the numbers wouldn't really go crazy until later in his career. Now, even when you stack that up to the era, Brady is definitely better, above average than his era at the time, especially in terms of passer rating, which is extremely impressive. But Mahomes is even better. Touchdowns are like superb, out of this world good. Yards, 53 more yards per game, and a 14-point passer rating differential between the average quarterback and Patrick Mahomes. Unbelievable stuff. That cannot be denied whatsoever. Mahomes is the superior guy statistically in the playoffs. But again, guys, this argument is not just about the stats. We must check in on the context. And the context is, of course, beginning with the competition. So when we take a look at the competition for both players, remember, Mahomes' numbers far superior. Tom Brady played much better opponents in the playoffs. And this is basically because the AFC was a lot tougher, as I suggested already. But he played tougher defenses. He played 7 top 10 defenses in his 11 games. Remember, Mahomes has played 14 playoff games, so he played 3 more playoff games during this stretch than Brady has, and only faced 4 top 10 defenses. And I believe 3 of them were in the Super Bowl. So only 1 of them came in the AFC, which was the 2021 Buffalo Bills. Number 1 defenses, 2 for Tom Brady, both the Steelers, by the way, in 01 and 04, and Patrick Mahomes faced 1, those Bills. Number 1 offenses, Brady faced 2 of the best offenses in NFL history, the 2004 Peyton Manning Colts and the 2001 Greatest Show on Turf. He beat both of them. And MVPs, Brady beat every single MVP, most valuable player. It almost like he had a chip on his shoulder when playing these players. 1 in the Super Bowl, he beat Manning twice in the playoffs, and he beat Steve McNair in the same playoffs that he beat Peyton Manning in 2003. And not only that, but maybe the most telling stat in terms of competition is that Brady faced 9 out of 11 teams in the playoffs that had won 12 games or more. Now, keep in mind that Mahomes has also played 2 seasons where they've played 1 more game, and he only played 4 teams that had 4 or less losses in the playoffs. He's played a lot of teams that did not have very impressive records in the playoffs, and he's beat up on those teams. When you take a look at it, he's played 6 teams that have had 9 or 10 wins. And he's rarely played a team that's had 13 or 14 wins in his playoff career. His average team faced had 11.7 wins. The average offense he faced was ranked about 7th. And the average defense he faced was ranked about 12th, 11th-ish. And then when it comes to Tom Brady again, he played the average team that won almost 12 and a half games per year, an average offense that was 6th, and an average defense that was ranked 9th. So the teams he was playing were both top 10 in both categories, offense and defense, and had about 12 wins per season. Now, again, Mahomes was playing about the 11th or 12th best defense, the 7th best offense. So again, Tom Brady, context-wise, just played tougher opponents, tougher individuals, tougher teams. So another piece of context in the playoffs in particular that are important to understand, especially when you're considering statistics for players, is the weather they're playing in the playoffs. Because during January games, it's going to be cold, it's going to be snowing, it's going to be windy, more often than not, especially if you're playing in New England and Kansas City. So let's compare the weather that they faced during their first 5 seasons in the NFL. Tom Brady is recognized as probably the greatest cold weather quarterback of all time, and that was pretty much formed during his early years in the NFL, because when he was playing in the playoffs, basically every game he played in New England was rather snowing or bitter cold. That's why Tom Brady is recognized, because he was winning those games, and they were crazy from a weather standpoint. Tom Brady played in the snow against the Raiders in 2001, which was a blizzard, as you can see by the picture. The Colts in 2003 and the Colts in 2004, both of those games had crazy snow involved. In the Titans, Steelers, and Jags games, they were all super cold, especially the Titans game, which was historically cold in 2003. The Pittsburgh Steelers game in the 2004 AFC Championship, which was in Pittsburgh, by the way, and had a wind chill of -1. That was on the road against the best defense in the NFL. And then he played some warmer games against Denver and the Steelers in 2001 and in 2005. But the Steeler game did have heavy winds, although he did leave that game with injury for Drew Bledsoe, who took over in that game. Kind of odd that both these quarterbacks have gotten injured during their runs to the Super Bowl at times. But Patrick Mahomes, pretty normal weather for Kansas City. He's been pretty fortunate. The one game that stands out is the Colts game, his first ever playoff game, much like Tom Brady, was snowing at times during that game. The wind is a little bit more of a factor for Patrick Mahomes than I would say on average Tom Brady, but both faced wind, but not snow, not bitter cold like Brady faced. I think the reason why Brady's numbers are not higher in his early years in the playoffs is because of the snow. It's because of the blizzards. It's because of the wind. It's because of the cold. And you're facing these elite defenses. Again, 7 out of 11 opponents had a top 10 defense, and you're playing in the snow. So it's going to be tough to put up huge numbers in the playoffs, which is really why I believe taking a look at the Super Bowl statistics are so important, because Super Bowls are played in domes. Super Bowls are played in an environment that is not rather home or away. It's oftentimes pretty even split in terms of fan base. Now, Patrick Mahomes did play in Tampa Bay in one of his Super Bowls, so that is factored in a little bit in terms of context. But both of these players have played in the Super Bowl against the best opponents from the other conference. And this is where the grandest stage, the biggest performances come through, and the world is watching, and this is where your legacy is made. Now, in terms of statistics in the playoffs, these are not era formatted. These are not changed for era. Tom Brady just straight up has been better in the Super Bowl than Patrick Mahomes. Now, Mahomes has thrown for more average yards by a yard per game. But it's kind of odd that Mahomes on the grandest stage, despite being spectacular from a statistical standpoint in the regular season and the playoffs, has not been good in the Super Bowl. His last Super Bowl was very efficient, and he got himself to a positive touchdown to interception ratio, throwing 3 against the Eagles. But Brady was 6-1 against the Panthers, the Rams, and the Eagles. All defenses were top 10 defenses. And a 100 passer rating was actually better than his career at the time, and better than his playoff resume or his regular season resume, or even his best season, I believe, of his career. His completion percentage numbers, his touchdown to interception ratio, his passer rating. Brady just played better in the Super Bowl when he was a young player, period. And when you take a look at the individual performances for themselves, you have Super Bowl 36 where he's that rookie player and he doesn't do a lot. It's a defensive game. It's 20-17. You're not going to be overwhelmingly patting Brady on the back for that win, but he makes some clutch throws. He has the game-winning drive. Of course, he throws the touchdown to David Patton and just manages the game to victory in his first win, but doesn't do anything to hurt the team and wasn't really asked to do anything to carry the team. And the reason why is because the Patriots were actually leading that game by 2 scores late in the game before the Rams came back, and then Brady stepped up in the final drive to win it. which is really where he had to. Super Bowl 38 was much different. Versus Carolina, the number one defense in the NFL, which was the Patriots in points allowed, had a bad game. They allowed 29 points against the Jake Delhomme, Steve Smith offense of the Carolina Panthers. They lit them up. And Tom Brady had to have the best game of his career. And he did. He set an NFL record for completions in the Super Bowl with 32. He attempted 48 passes and still had a 66.7 completion percentage, 354 yards, 3 touchdowns. He threw 1 pick, and he had a 100.5 passer rating, which are superb MVP numbers for that time, especially 2003, which we discussed was a very much a low point in the NFL for yards, touchdowns, and stats. In 2004, the 2005 Super Bowl 39, he was super efficient. The closest thing you would see to an Eagles Super Bowl for Mahomes, and this was also against the Eagles and Andy Reid, a 69.7 completion percentage, 236 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks, 110.2 rating, where the Patriots controlled much of the game against the Philadelphia Eagles and kind of like soared their way to victory. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't difficult either, and Brady had a very good game. But for whatever reason, he didn't win MVP because they gave it to Deion Branch. Not sure why, but they did. Mahomes in his first 2 Super Bowls was far below his average play. In his first Super Bowl, he had a very tough first half before kind of bouncing back in the second half and leading a comeback with 286 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks, and a 78 passer rating, which is not good, even for Brady's era. But that comeback is definitely something to note. He had a spectacular comeback, a great throw to Tyreek Hill, and some very nice moments. In Super Bowl 55, it was a disaster all around. Mahomes didn't play well. The offensive line played awful, and the Bucs dominated that game. 26 for 49, 270 yards, which were mostly garbage time, 2 picks, just a disaster of a game, one of the worst games of his career. He wasn't feeling the pressure well. He was turning the ball over, and the team as a collective just underwhelmed completely with a 52.3 passer rating. And in Super Bowl 57, he bounces back, going 21 for 27, 77.8 completion percentage, 182 yards, 3 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. So as you guys can see, Patrick Mahomes has played 1 good game in the Super Bowl, and even in that game, it wasn't as good as his average performance in the playoffs because he usually throws for a lot more than 182 yards. But in his best game, he wasn't asked to do a lot. Tom Brady was asked to do more in the Super Bowls. Even in the first game where he threw 27 attempts, which is the same amount of attempts that Mahomes threw in his third one. It's very odd because that's a super efficient game for Patrick Mahomes, and he did what he had to do to win. That's exactly the point I've been making about Tom Brady this whole time. It's just funny that it turns on its head when we're talking about Mahomes in that Super Bowl against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, in terms of support in the Super Bowl as well, it's important to understand that we talked about the running game for the Patriots and the Chiefs throughout their first 5 seasons. This was also shown in the Super Bowl. Brady had to throw more in Super Bowl 38 because they were only running for 3.6 yards per carry. Despite running the ball 35 times, they couldn't run it that well. They only ran it for 3.6 yards per carry. Super Bowl 39, similar story, only 4 yards a carry. The only successful Super Bowl where the weight was lifted off his back from a passing perspective was that first Super Bowl where they ran for 5.3 yards per carry against the Rams, where they were in the lead for a lot of the game. The Chiefs, on the other hand, have ran for 6 yards a carry in 2 out of their 3 Super Bowls with Mahomes, and 4.4 in their first one where they sealed the game with the Damian Williams long run against the 49ers. And in that Eagles Super Bowl, they were super effective, just running all over the Eagles to the point where Mahomes really didn't become a factor until right at the end of the game because they were just so good at running the ball. And to cap all this Super Bowl stuff off, the grandest stage of them all, Tom Brady was just unbelievable in 2003-2004 in terms of Super Bowl performances. And you may say that these were the best back-to-back performances in the Super Bowl we had seen to that point in terms of efficiency, volume, and all of it. Overall, Tom Brady was at his best in the biggest game. And Patrick Mahomes was at his worst in the biggest game, which is the final thing that we must consider. Now that we have debated and discussed all the categories, the stats, the context, it's time for the definitive argument for both sides. Mahomes was statistically the more impressive player, and his numbers stand out even when adjusted for era. Individually, Patrick Mahomes took advantage of his situation. His accolades far surpass Tom's. While he played lesser opponents, he more consistently made it deep into the playoffs. He may have less rings, but he has the better combination of championships and individual acclaim. Tom Brady played in a tougher division, tougher conference, tougher weather versus better teams, stingier defenses, and more impressive peers. He had much less talent around him offensively in the passing and running game, and led the much more unproven head coach to more championships and played bigger and more consistent than Patrick Mahomes on the grandest stage. I came into this topic fully willing to concede that Patrick Mahomes had the greater first 5 seasons of an NFL career than Tom Brady. And sitting here right now, I believe that most people will believe that Patrick Mahomes had the greater 5 years. But when determining which 5 seasons were more impressive, after researching this topic, after debating this topic, to me, the reason I side with Tom Brady here is the context. Because the context to this argument, to this debate, is overwhelming for Tom Brady. The difficulty of those first 5 seasons for Tom Brady far outweigh Patrick Mahomes. So even though Mahomes has more impressive stats and has the more impressive balance of winning and statistics and individual accomplishments, the context to me matters most in which 5 seasons, which beginning to a career was more impressive to me. Because Tom Brady played with lesser teammates, played with lesser weapons, lesser offensive line, a lesser running game, sure, slightly better defenses, but ultimately he accomplished the main objective, the main goal more often in a tougher environment, tougher weather, tougher opponents, tougher division, tougher conference, tougher peers. Tom Brady was still able to win 3 Super Bowls, to nearly be unbeaten in a 2-year stretch. So to me, Patrick Mahomes, I get it. The numbers, the feats, the accomplishments, the accolades are undeniably great. And he is phenomenal. And I'm not taking anything away from him. But not even he was able to match the warrior-like clutch gene of a young Tom Brady. And that's why I'm siding with Brady for the more impressive beginning to their career. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with me? Or do you disagree? Let me know in the comments section below. And whatever you decide, I hope you enjoyed this video. Gronk spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more NFL content and debates just like this. It's Mitch. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.